The Great Council of the Galactic Concord assembled in the Grand Hall of Polaris Prime, a marvel of shimmering crystal and suspended starlight. Representatives of hundreds of species from across the galaxy filled the chamber, their forms ranging from ethereal beings of light to scaled leviathans that dwarfed the others. At the heart of the room, glowing softly, was the tribunal core, a massive, pulsating sphere that projected an air of solemnity. It was the nexus of galactic law, a symbol of the unity that had kept the galaxy at peace for centuries. Yet today, that unity was on trial. Standing in the center of the hall, under the gaze of countless eyes and appendages, was Captain Dorian Kane, a human from the fledgling Terran Federation. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his uniform crisp but his demeanor surprisingly nonchalant. His sharp eyes scanned the room, taking in the spectacle of alien dignitaries with a mix of curiosity and amusement. Most species would have crumbled under the weight of such scrutiny, but Dorian seemed impervious. "Captain Kane!" boomed a voice like grinding stone. It belonged to Counselor Valros, a crystalline entity that refracted light with every movement. "You stand accused of violating the Concord's rules of engagement during the conflict with the Eridani Dominion. How do you plead?" Dorian smirked, his confidence bordering on arrogance. "Violating your rules? Sure, I'll admit it. But let's not pretend this is about rules. This is about results." A ripple of murmurs and telepathic whispers coursed through the chamber. Valros's crystalline form glowed brighter, a sign of mounting frustration. "You admit to disregarding the principles that maintain order in galactic warfare, principles agreed upon by every member of the Concord." "Not every member," Dorian interjected, raising a finger. "Humans weren't part of your Concord when those rules were written. We didn't agree to fight your wars by your playbook." Valros's glow dimmed slightly, as if struggling to maintain composure. "The rules of engagement exist to ensure that conflict remains measured and honorable. Without them, we are no better than savages." "Measured and honorable," Dorian repeated, his tone laced with irony. "Tell me, Counselor, what's honorable about being outnumbered 10-1? About having your colonies raised while you wait for measured diplomacy to save the day? If we'd followed your rules, Earth would be nothing but ash right now." The chamber fell silent. The humans' war with the Eridani Dominion had been brief but brutal, its outcome shocking the galaxy. Despite being technologically inferior and vastly outnumbered, humanity had emerged victorious. The Terran Federation's victory wasn't due to superior firepower or advanced tactics. It was their audacity, their refusal to play by the rules, that had turned the tide. Counselor Valen, a serpentine being with iridescent scales, coiled forward. Its voice was a soft hiss, yet it carried across the chamber like a chilling wind. "Captain Kane, the methods employed by your forces were unconventional, to say the least. Deploying decoy colonies rigged with explosives? Using neural dampeners to confuse enemy crews? These acts are considered abhorrent by every civilized species." Dorian crossed his arms, unbothered by the accusation. "Abhorrent? Maybe. But effective. The Eridani didn't hesitate to use their advantages against us. We just used what we had. Survival isn't always pretty. Survival at the cost of morality is a slippery slope," Valen hissed. "Do you not see the danger in your methods? The precedent they set?" Dorian's smirk faded, replaced by a steely resolve. "What I see is a galaxy that's forgotten what it means to fight for its life. You've all grown comfortable with your treaties and protocols, so comfortable that you don't know how to deal with someone who refuses to play along. The Eridani were annihilating our people. We did what we had to do. If that makes us monsters in your eyes, so be it." The chamber erupted into a cacophony of voices, each species debating the merits and dangers of Dorian's words. Some argued that humanity's tactics were a necessary evolution in a galaxy too reliant on outdated principles. Others condemned them as reckless and barbaric, a threat to the fragile peace the Concord had worked so hard to maintain. Amid the chaos, Dorian scanned the room, noting the varying reactions. He could tell that some of the representatives, particularly those from weaker or marginalized species, were intrigued by humanity's success. They had lived under the shadow of more powerful civilizations, bound by rules that offered little protection. To them, humanity's defiance was a beacon of hope, or at least, an interesting alternative. Valrose's crystalline form pulsed brightly, silencing the chamber. Enough. Captain Kane, your actions have not only shaken the foundations of this council but also the trust upon which it is built. Do you not understand the consequences of your defiance? Dorian stepped forward, his voice firm but calm. I understand perfectly. The Eridani were stronger, faster, and more advanced than we were. If we'd fought them on their terms, we'd be extinct. Instead, we adapted. We turned their strengths into weaknesses, and we survived. That's what humans do. We survive. Valrose tilted its crystalline head. And at what cost? Dorian's gaze swept across the chamber, meeting the eyes, or equivalent sensory organs, of the assembled representatives. At the cost of winning. The Eridani weren't interested in peace or negotiations. They wanted us gone. So we gave them a reason to think twice before trying again. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with the weight of unspoken questions. Dorian could see the gears turning in the minds of the representatives. Humanity's defiance was disruptive, yes, but it had also exposed cracks in the Concord's carefully maintained system. The rules of engagement, so revered and unyielding, had been bypassed with startling success. What did that mean for the future of the galaxy? Valrose spoke again, its voice softer but no less stern. Your methods may have saved your people, Captain Kane, but they have also challenged the very fabric of this council. The Concord cannot ignore this. The tribunal must deliberate on humanity's place among us, and the risks it poses. Dorian nodded, his smirk returning. Take all the time you need. Humanity's not going anywhere. As the council dissolved into private deliberations, Dorian stepped back, his confidence unshaken. He knew humanity had thrown a wrench into the galaxy's established order, but he also knew this: the rules only mattered to those who could afford to follow them. And humans had never been afraid to rewrite the rulebook. The Great Council's deliberations stretched into the hours, the representatives arguing fiercely in their respective chambers. Meanwhile, Captain Dorian Kane sat in a secluded waiting area, his gaze fixed on a holographic display of the starfield outside. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, but he masked it with his usual air of confidence. Humanity's defiance was at the center of galactic discourse, and he was its unapologetic face. A soft chime broke the silence, and the door to the chamber slid open. A figure stepped inside, Ambassador Rissa Veeler, humanity's representative to the Concord. She was lean, sharp-eyed, and brimming with an intensity that could rival Dorian's. Her formal attire gave her an air of diplomacy, but the hard set of her jaw revealed her frustration. You certainly know how to stir the pot, Captain, she said, her tone clipped. The Council is in uproar. Half of them want to expel humanity from the Concord before we've even been fully admitted. Dorian leaned back, his smirk unfaltering. And the other half? Conflicted, Rissa admitted, crossing her arms. You've made them question their own rules, their assumptions about warfare. That's both good and dangerous. They don't like uncertainty. Uncertainty's better than extinction, Dorian replied. The Eridani weren't interested in Concord rules. They were interested in wiping us out. Playing by their rules wasn't an option. Rissa sighed, rubbing her temples. You're not wrong, but you're making enemies. The Council's strength lies in its unity. They fear anything that threatens to fracture that unity. Unity built on outdated rules isn't unity. Dorian shot back. It's complacency. Before Rissa could respond, another chime echoed through the chamber. The holographic interface on the wall flared to life, revealing Zenith, a crystalline envoy of the Concord, serving as the tribunal's impartial arbiter. Captain Kane, Zenith intoned, its voice a perfect blend of calm and authority. The Council requests your presence for further questioning. Dorian stood, straightening his uniform. Good. I was getting bored. Rissa grabbed his arm, stopping him before he could leave. Remember, you're not just representing yourself. Every word you say reflects on humanity. Don't give them an excuse to shut us out. Dorian's smirk softened into something more genuine. Don't worry, Ambassador. I've got this. He stepped into the tribunal chamber once more, the council's representatives seated in their grand tiers of authority. The atmosphere was heavier now, the weight of deliberation pressing down like a storm cloud. Councillor Valros, still the presiding voice of the council, addressed him directly. Captain Kane, your actions have sparked debate among us. However, this is no longer merely about the rules of engagement. It is about the precedent your defiance sets. What assurance can you give this council that humanity will not escalate conflicts recklessly? Dorian's eyes scanned the chamber, reading the tension on every face, or its alien equivalent. His voice, when he spoke, was steady and firm. The same assurance you give each other, none. Let's not pretend any species here has never acted in its own interest. The Concord wasn't built on trust, it was built on necessity. Humanity's no different. We're here to survive, to protect our people. That's what we did. By disregarding every rule this council holds sacred, hissed Valen, the Serpentine counselor, you turned war into chaos. That chaos threatens us all. Dorian leaned forward, resting his hands on the podium. And what did your precious rules get us when the Eridani attacked? Nothing. We begged for aid, but the Concord's bureaucracy couldn't act fast enough. If we'd waited, there'd be no humans left to have this conversation. A low murmur spread through the chamber. It was true, and many knew it. The Concord's rules had slowed its response to the Eridani assault, leaving humanity to fend for itself. It was a flaw in the system they rarely acknowledged, but now it was laid bare. Even so, Valros said, its crystalline form pulsing faintly, your methods were extreme. Rigging decoy colonies with explosives endangered civilians. Wrong, Dorian interrupted sharply. Those colonies were uninhabited, and the explosions were triggered remotely. The only lives endangered were Eridani soldiers. Don't confuse pragmatism with recklessness. The room fell silent again, the representatives exchanging wary glances. Dorian pressed his advantage. The Eridani didn't expect us to fight the way we did. They thought we'd play by their rules, that we'd be predictable, easy to crush. We showed them otherwise. That's why we won. Not because we had better tech or more ships, but because we refused to think like prey. A new voice broke the tension, deep and resonant. Councillor Thurrock, a hulking, armored creature from the distant Kaltoran Empire, rose from his seat. There is merit in what the human says. Too often, we rely on tradition and protocol at the expense of adaptability. This council was created to maintain peace, but peace cannot exist without strength. Thurrock's words sent ripples through the chamber. His species was one of the Concord's oldest and most respected members, and his endorsement carried significant weight. Dorian allowed himself a small nod of approval, though he knew better than to assume victory. Adaptability is not the same as chaos, countered Valen, coiling its sinuous body tighter. If every species disregarded the rules as humanity has, the galaxy would descend into anarchy. Then maybe it's time the rules evolved, Dorian said, his voice calm but unyielding. You want to keep the peace? Fine. But peace doesn't mean pretending threats don't exist. It means being ready to face them, however you can. The debate raged on, the representatives divided. Some saw humanity as a necessary disruptor, a species willing to challenge the stagnation of the Concord. Others viewed them as a dangerous wildcard, a threat to the order that had kept the galaxy stable for centuries. Through it all, Dorian stood his ground, his unwavering confidence both infuriating and inspiring. He wasn't just defending humanity's actions, he was forcing the Council to confront its own failings. Finally, Valros called for a recess, the councillors retreating to their private chambers to deliberate further. As Dorian left the tribunal floor, Rissa was waiting for him, her expression a mix of exasperation and grudging respect. You really know how to make waves, she said. Dorian shrugged. Waves get things moving. That's what we're here for, isn't it? Rissa shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. You're impossible. He grinned. And yet here we are. The tribunal reconvened in the Grand Hall, the air crackling with tension as the councillors returned to their seats. The debate had grown fiercer, and the divide between those who supported humanity's methods and those who opposed them had widened. Captain Dorian Kane strode back into the chamber with the same confidence as before, though even he couldn't ignore the gravity of the moment. This wasn't just about humanity anymore. This was about whether the galaxy could adapt to a new reality. The crystalline voice of Councillor Valros reverberated through the chamber. Captain Kane, this tribunal is at an impasse. Your defiance of the rules of engagement has exposed vulnerabilities in our governance. Yet your actions have also saved your people and revealed strategies that some find compelling. Dorian crossed his arms, his expression calm but watchful. So, what's next? Another lecture on how humans are a galactic menace? Or are we finally going to talk about what actually matters? Valros's form pulsed faintly, betraying its irritation. What matters, Captain, is the stability of this Concord. And that stability is threatened by unpredictability, by species that refuse to adhere to the rules we have spent millennia perfecting. A new voice echoed through the chamber, sharp and unwavering. It was Councillor Valen, the Serpentine representative who had been among humanity's harshest critics. Captain, your words are bold, but boldness alone cannot justify chaos. Let us test your mettle not with rhetoric, but with action. Dorian raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. And what exactly do you have in mind? Valen's body coiled tighter, its iridescent scales gleaming. A simulation. A test of your tactics against Concord standards. We will pit your methods against a controlled scenario, judged by this council. If your strategies hold merit, they will prove themselves. If not, you will face the consequences. Dorian smirked, sensing an opportunity. You want me to fight a fake war to prove I can fight a real one? Fine. But don't be surprised when I win. The chamber buzzed with murmurs and telepathic exchanges as the council debated the proposal. After a few moments, Valros raised a crystalline hand, silencing the noise. The tribunal accepts Councillor Valen's suggestion. Captain Kane, you will lead your forces in a controlled simulation against an opposing fleet governed by Concord-approved strategies. The results will determine the validity of your methods. Dorian's smirk widened. Let's get started. The simulation arena was a marvel of technology, an expansive holographic environment capable of replicating the vastness of space and the chaos of interstellar combat. Dorian stood on the command deck of his simulated flagship, surrounded by his crew, each of them represented by holographic interfaces linked to their counterparts on the Eternity's edge. The opposition fleet, a formidable array of vessels commanded by an AI programmed with Concord-approved tactics, was already in formation. Zenith, the neutral arbiter of the simulation, materialized as a glowing crystalline sphere beside Dorian. The parameters are set. You will command a fleet of standard Terran vessels against a Concord-modeled armada. Victory will require either the complete destruction of the opposing fleet or the successful defense of your designated territory. Begin when ready. Dorian glanced at his crew, their holographic forms flickering with anticipation. You heard the AI. Let's show them what humanity can do. The simulation began with the Concord fleet advancing in a textbook-perfect formation, their ships aligned for maximum defensive coverage. Dorian's forces, by contrast, appeared scattered and disorganized, their movements erratic. The councillors watching from the observation chamber exchanged skeptical glances. What is he doing? Valen hissed. His forces are scattered. He's leaving himself vulnerable. Dorian, however, was unperturbed. They think we're disorganized, he said, addressing his crew. Good. Let them underestimate us. He began issuing commands, his voice calm but precise. Break into 3 groups. Group 1, feint toward their left flank. Group 2, draw fire on the right. Group 3, hold position and wait for my signal. As the battle unfolded, the Concord fleet responded predictably, shifting their formation to counter the perceived threats. Dorian's forces, meanwhile, executed a series of rapid maneuvers that exploited the gaps in the enemy's defenses. Decoy ships lured Concord vessels into ambushes, while EMP bursts disabled key systems, leaving the opposition vulnerable. Group 3, move in now, Dorian ordered. The previously stationary ships surged forward, cutting through the disoriented Concorde fleet with ruthless efficiency. In less than an hour, the tide had turned, and the simulated Concorde armada was in shambles. The council chamber was silent as the final blow was struck, the holographic display dissolving to reveal the results. Dorian's fleet had achieved a decisive victory, suffering minimal losses. Even the staunchest critics were visibly unsettled. Valen broke the silence, her voice a venomous hiss. Your tactics were effective, but at what cost? You relied on deception and disruption, strategies that erode the very principles of honor and trust. Dorian shrugged, his confidence undiminished. You call it deception, I call it adaptation. The galaxy isn't fair, and war sure as hell isn't. We play to win, not to make friends. Counselor Tharuk, the hulking Kaltoran, rumbled his approval. The humans' methods may be unconventional, but they are undeniably effective. In a true conflict, survival often outweighs tradition. Valros's crystalline form pulsed with frustration. This council cannot condone such reckless disregard for the rules. If every species acted as humans do, chaos would engulf the galaxy. Dorian stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Chaos isn't what you fear. What you fear is losing control. You've built a system that works for the strongest species, for those who already have power. Humanity didn't have that luxury. We had to fight smart, fight dirty, just to survive. And guess what? It worked. The chamber erupted into debate, the councillors divided more sharply than ever. Dorian stood his ground, his presence unyielding. He wasn't just fighting for humanity's place in the Concorde. He was forcing the galaxy to confront the uncomfortable truth that the rules they revered might no longer be enough. As the tribunal adjourned for further deliberation, Rissa met Dorian in the waiting chamber, her expression a mix of exasperation and admiration. You just had to win, didn't you? She said, shaking her head. Dorian smirked. Winning's kind of my thing. You've made enemies, Rissa warned. But you've also made allies. Let's hope it's enough. Dorian leaned back, his confidence unwavering. It'll be enough. They'll see. The galaxy's changing, and so are the rules. The Great Council reconvened in the shimmering chamber of the tribunal core, the tension so thick it seemed to weigh down the air. The simulated battle had left an indelible mark on every representative present. Some were shaken by the sheer audacity of Captain Dorian Kane's methods, others were emboldened by the undeniable efficiency of his unconventional tactics. As the councillors returned to their seats, Dorian entered the hall once more, his posture as confident as ever. Councillor Valros's crystalline form pulsed faintly, a sign of its restrained frustration. Captain Kane, your performance in the simulation has forced this council to confront uncomfortable truths. Your methods, while effective, represent a challenge to the very foundation of our Concorde. A decision must be made regarding humanity's future in this collective. Dorian stepped forward, his voice calm but resolute. You mean whether humanity has a future in this collective? Let's not sugarcoat it, Counselor. You're deciding if you can accept a species that refuses to follow your playbook. The chamber buzzed with murmurs and subtle telepathic exchanges. Some counselors nodded in agreement with Dorian's bluntness, while others bristled at his defiance. Counselor Valen, coiled in its seat, spoke with icy precision. Your arrogance blinds you, human. This council has endured for millennia because of the stability provided by the rules of engagement. Without them, we risk descending into anarchy. Dorian met Valen's gaze, his tone unyielding. And those rules almost cost us everything. The Eridani didn't care about your laws or stability. They cared about wiping us out. If we'd followed your rules, humanity wouldn't be here to have this conversation. Enough. Belrose interjected, its voice like grinding stone. Captain Kane, the Council has heard your arguments and witnessed your tactics. Now we must deliberate. You may wait outside while we reach our decision. Dorian nodded, turning to leave without a word. As he exited the chamber, Rissa Veeler, humanity's ambassador, intercepted him in the waiting area. Her expression was a mix of exhaustion and determination. You've done all you can, Captain, she said. Now it's up to them. Dorian smirked, though there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. Let's hope they've got more sense than pride. Hours passed as the council debated behind closed doors. Dorian paced the waiting area, his mind replaying every argument, every maneuver in the simulation. He knew humanity's defiance had shaken the foundations of the Concord, but whether that would lead to acceptance or rejection was still uncertain. Finally, the chamber doors opened, and Zenith, the crystalline arbiter of the tribunal, appeared. Its neutral voice resonated in the hall. Captain Kane, Ambassador Wheeler, the council has reached a decision. You may return to the chamber. The pair exchanged a glance before stepping inside. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation as the councilors turned their attention to Valros, who stood at the center of the room. Captain Kane, Valros began, its crystalline form glowing faintly. This council acknowledges that your methods during the Eridani conflict and subsequent simulation were effective. However, they remain in direct violation of the rules of engagement, which are the cornerstone of galactic stability. Dorian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, letting Valros continue. Nonetheless, Valros said, its tone shifting, this council also recognizes that the galaxy is changing. The threats we face are evolving, and our current systems may no longer be sufficient. Humanity's adaptability and resourcefulness have highlighted flaws in our governance that must be addressed. The chamber erupted into a mix of murmurs and exclamations, but Valros raised a hand to silence them. Therefore, the Council has decided that humanity will be granted provisional membership in the Concord. However, this membership comes with conditions. Your methods will be studied and evaluated, and humanity will work with the Concord to refine the rules of engagement for future conflicts. Dorian raised an eyebrow, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. So, you want us to help rewrite the rules? Precisely, Valros replied. Your insights may prevent others from resorting to such extreme measures. But know this, should humanity act recklessly or destabilize the Concord further, your membership will be revoked. Dorian nodded, his smirk widening. Fair enough. But don't expect us to hold back when survival's on the line. Councillor Tharuk, the hulking Kaltoran, rumbled in approval. It is a wise decision. Humanity's fire may burn brightly, but it has shown the potential to illuminate rather than destroy. Not all were pleased. Valen's serpentine form coiled tightly, its voice dripping with disdain. You've unleashed a dangerous precedent, Valros. This council will regret bending to the whims of a reckless species. Valros's crystalline glow brightened. Perhaps. Or perhaps we have taken the first step toward a stronger, more adaptable Concord. The decision was final. The council adjourned, the representatives dispersing to their respective chambers. As the hall emptied, Rissa turned to Dorian, her expression a mix of relief and caution. Well, Captain, she said, you've done it. Humanity is part of the Concord, on probation but still. Dorian chuckled, his confidence unshaken. Probation's fine. We've always worked best under pressure. Rissa rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a small smile. Just try not to get us kicked out before we've even unpacked. As they left the chamber, Dorian glanced back at the tribunal core, its pulsating light reflecting the challenges still ahead. Humanity had secured its place among the stars, but the fight was far from over. The galaxy was changing, and with it, the rules that had governed it for centuries. Dorian knew humanity's journey was just beginning, and he couldn't wait to see what came next. Ambassador, he said, his tone laced with humor, let's get to work rewriting those rules. Something tells me the galaxy's not ready for what's coming. And with that, the first steps toward a new era of interstellar diplomacy and conflict began, led by a species that refused to play by the rules.